Oh, you can't see that. So if I call, yeah, call. Yeah, look.
What? Oh. Yeah. How do you, which way you want to go? Or letting people participate, even though they're not here? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Oh, she just put not voting. That's all. Yeah. You just treated as not voting, so should I have her call? They can call it on Zoom. Yeah, so how's it they hook up on it? Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah. Right. Delegate should call you in a couple of minutes then. Okay. Okay.
So what?
How do they hook up this? Do you call them? Do they call in?
He dials in. I mean,
Okay.
what? Wait, so I shouldn't call for a vote from you. Okay. Or Eric. Or Liz. But then people have to know you're participating. You didn't call the vote. Are you gonna be present or not?
Yeah, the president is. not
You're
voting.
present, but not voting. Right? Okay. So you can say, if I would call you, you'd say present but not voting. So I won't call you though.
You don't have to call them.
What? I'm good. All right, I just won't. I'll just call you for the, listen, I gotta call you for the present, for the roll call. And then you have to say present. Okay. Because that way you can participate. Oh, you can? Oh. What? Did you say? In front of? Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Sean. Hold on. I,
None of us.
No?
Hold you or anything. I heard it's good. I heard they did a good job. Right? Good, yeah. Yeah, hey, you got it.
All right, we'll kick this off. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Williamsport City Council meeting. It's Thursday, January 20th, 2022, 7 o'clock. Training Transit Center 2 and remote. Please rise for the invocation by Councilman Randy Allison, followed by the flag salute and roll call.
We're here tonight, Heavenly Father, to do the city's business. I pray that we make good and wise decisions that will be focused and productive as we go through the year, not just tonight, but throughout the whole year. And as we navigate the issues that our city faces, and help us to be aware of those, Lord, and help us to seize the opportunities that may lay before us and not miss them due to being distracted by other issues. Father, I also pray that we've worked well together as a team over the past couple of years. I ask that you help us to continue in that spirit of collegiality and cooperation and collaboration. Although times we may not agree with each other, that's the way it should be if we're having an independent group of people, but we've been able to do that with grace and respect for each other. Help us to keep that. And I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. United States of America. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Frank, you can call the roll.
Mr. Allison,
Here.
Mr. Mackey,
Here.
Mr. Pelisi,
Here.
Mrs. Katz. Here. Mr. Yoder.
Present. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. First item, next item 3 on the
I'm here
agenda.
too. I'm here too, Janice.
Oh, I'm sorry, Liz Mealy, Miss Mealy.
Thanks. Here.
All right, item 3, approval of city council meeting minutes dated December 16th, 2021, January 3rd, 2022, and January 6th, 2022. Is there a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank, on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz. Ms. Mealy. She can't vote. Okay, Mrs. Katz. I'm done.
Yeah, Janice, I don't think that I won't vote till I get to council, but thanks for thinking of me. Okay.
Yes. So 1, 2,
All
3,
right. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Item 4, limited courtesy to the floor. We've had no requests tonight. Item 5, appointments, reappointments for the Veterans Memorial Commission. We have 4 individuals for reappointment: Mr. Howard Wilt, Jess Hackenberg, Charles Smith, and George Hiegler. I hope I pronounced that right. Mayor Slaughter, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Council President Yoder, Vice President Katz, members of council and administration. Yes, tonight you have before you reappointments to the Veterans Memorial Commission, as President Yoder just mentioned. This is a 5-year term commencing on January 20th, 2022 to January 20th, 2027. As I'm sure we're all aware, the Veterans Memorial Commission does a fantastic job with the park. A lot of great improvements over the years, and most recently with the A6 and all other things that are currently going on. The monument that's going to the Gold Star Monument. And so we're very, very thrilled that they want to continue their terms for reappointment, and that's before you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. I can't see if any of the individuals are there this evening. If they are, they're welcome to come up and offer any comments if they wish. They don't have to by any means.
They're not, President Yoder.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Slaughter. Are there any questions or comments from members of council on the reappointments? Mrs. Katz.
I would just like to say, reiterating what the mayor said, men have done an incredible job with the Veterans Memorial Park. And nobody has gone up to see it yet. It is absolutely fantastic. And they keep on working and improving. And also, I think not only men, but we have to also say thank you to all the people that have donated their bricks, names on their bricks. Also to Penn College, all the work they've done with the Veterans Memorial Park. And again, these men have done a fantastic job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Katz. Are there any other comments or questions from other members of council this evening? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. And thank you to those who we've just reappointed for serving for your previous service and continued service. Our Veterans Memorial Park is a great asset for the city, and we're very thankful to have you at the helm of leading it and continuing to progress that treasure that we have in the city. So thank you very much. Item 6, moving on, transfer ordinance and second reading. Mrs. Frank on the
An ordinance, transfer ordinance, and final reading.
is there a motion and a second to open discussion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Pavlak, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. This transfer ordinance is in second reading. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlak. This was sent to finance, so we normally do these in first reading. Given that we hadn't had committees formed and advertised during first reading, I sent it to finance just for some additional discussion. Ms. Mealy, good evening. How are you?
Great, Adam. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you for asking. This was reviewed in finance.
Yes, it was. And there really was very limited discussion. You'd already voted on it once in front of City Council 2 weeks ago. I was unable to attend that meeting as I go annual on vacation at the beginning of the year. And so I asked the other two members of the Finance Committee whether there'd been any discussion, whether anything needed to be fleshed out further, I suppose, in subcommittee. And they said that there was nothing of particular concern during the first council meeting. We discussed the procedure. The only real question I think that I had, and I believe the other members of the committee were with me on this, was for the administration. We're effectively creating space for the administration to hire instead of contract out. And we were wondering where the administration was at with looking at actual hires for the position in question. I don't know if Mayor Slaughter can answer that or anyone else, but no one at the Finance Committee meeting could answer that question.
Pending this final approval on this ordinance, Councilwoman will start that process.
Great, thanks, Mayor Slaughter. Excellent. And so do we have a timeline at all for the process, or is that just, we have any sense of the market? I don't really know what we've looked at so far.
Don't have a necessary timeline. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Hopefully it doesn't take too long.
Excellent. Sounds good. That was everything Autumn, and I will send it back to you guys for further discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Are there other questions or comments from other members of council on the motion? If there is, I can't, my screen switched on me. So if there is somebody, just jump in.
No, there doesn't appear to be.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
All right, great. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank, and thank you all. Continuing on item 7, resolution accepting donation from the city of Hazelton metal detector. Mrs. Frank, please.
Resolution accepting the donation from the city of Hazelton, a metal detector.
Is there a motion and a second to open discussion?
So moved.
Mayor Slaughter, good evening again.
Good evening again, President Yoder. Yes, what you have before you is a resolution to accept the donation of a metal detector from the city of Hazelton. This is no cost to the city of Hazelton nor to the city of Williamsport. The Mayor Cassatt from the city of Hazelton received these metal detectors and reached out to our mayor's group, and he had a few extra. We responded and said that we would take one, and he graciously agreed to donate it to not just the city of Williamsport, but to a few other municipalities as well. We do not have a use for it currently, or we don't know definitively where it's going to go as of yet. It will be stored most likely at Public Works in the interim. But again, this is no cost to the city and no cost to the city of Hazelton. And we're thankful to Mayor Cassatt and Hazelton for this donation. This was reviewed in Public Safety, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. This was reviewed in public safety. Mr. Mackey?
That is correct. And the mayor pretty much summed it up. I mean, this is a free metal detector from the city of Hazelton. I'm glad to see that you're out there making connections. It's clearly paying off. So I think really most of the conversation revolved around where this metal detector would be used and who, if anyone, would need to staff it while it was in use. But aside from that, it was passed on with a positive recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mackey. Are there any comments or questions from members of council this evening?
I just have one question. Is this mobile? It can be moved around?
Yes, it can be moved around, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we can
it's
use
one
it-
that you walk through, but you can move it. yes.
Right. Okay. So we can use it for different venues as the need may be.
Correct, yep. And that's what Chief Snyder and I actually are discussing that. We could
Okay.
have it one place for a little while, but if you need to add an event or something like that,
Right.
we could move it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of council? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
All right, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Thank you, Mayor Slaughter, members of council. Continuing on, item 8, resolution uncollected real estate taxes. Mrs. Frank in short form, please.
Resolution uncollected real estate taxes for 2021.
Is there a motion in this a second to open discussion?
So move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Grimes, good evening, sir.
Good evening, President Yoder, members of council. If you're okay with it, I will go over the broad overview of taxes collected in 2021, which is customary to do at the January meeting. And then just present both resolutions, give you the information at once since they are sort of companions to each other, if that's appropriate.
Certainly.
Okay, so we talked in depth at the finance meeting about the revenue collections from 2021. So I'm just going to give a very broad overview here. But it came in a memorandum to all of City Council, subject 2021 city revenue collections. There's a few pages to it. Most of it's self-explanatory. The few things that I wanted to point out in regards to the revenue collection comparison report, which was the second page, the first page after the memo page. City real estate tax was up. That was mainly because of an increase in tax rate. Business privilege and mercantile taxes were down. and they were down 6.6%, which is not a good thing to be down, but the business privilege taxes in 2021 is based on business revenue for 2020, which is when the pandemic started and hit businesses the hardest. So we actually budgeted for about 1.77 million in business privilege taxes for 2021, and we ended at 2.3 million. So we are way ahead of what we expected. And while we did see a decrease, it was much less than anticipated because of the pandemic. And that's similar with local service taxes. We were down about 3.7% local service tax. There's a variety of reasons why local service tax can go down, but it's a good pulse on our local economy. Local service taxes, specifically workers working in the city of Williamsport. I shared with the finance committee an article from Wilkes-Barre where they went, they just had a dramatic decrease in commercial office rentals in their downtown. That certainly can be part of this. The work from home has helped us in a sense where people that normally work outside the city are now in their home in the city working and paying local service tax. But it also can hurt us in the aspect where if large offices are closing or reducing the number of employees in that office, it reduces our local service tax. So it's a little early to tell exactly how that's going to affect us, but that local service tax and earned income tax was also down, but not, dramatically, 3.7 and 1.7%. Aside from that, realty transfer tax was way up in 2021. And I think that's because in 2020, some sales were held off because of the pandemic, and then also the housing prices have dramatically increased. And some larger business sales, they waited till you get through the pandemic to see what volatility is still there. So there's a little bit of a catch-up factor there, plus just the higher prices of real estate caused that realty transfer tax to go up because that's based on a percentage of the sale. And then the only other thing that I'll point to is on page 4, second to last page of that report, just because that's what we're going to cover here in just a minute. Shows in 2021 our original duplicate balance, what I was charged to collect in real estate taxes was 15.388 million for 9,022 taxable parcels. There's an unpaid remaining balance of $947,390.97, which is just over 6% of the real estate taxes uncollected, which is actually our lowest percentage uncollected since we started tracking in 1988. So that's a good segue into the resolutions you have in front of you. This does have to go as 2 separate resolutions, but the resolutions say that we have $947,390.97 of uncollected 2021 real estate taxes. One of these resolutions authorizes us to send those tax bills to county tax claim, where they can then collect those bills and remit those payments to us, or if those bills are not paid within a certain number of years, they can actually sell that property to pay those tax bills. And the other one exonerates me from being charged with collecting that amount of money. Like I said, that's a good rate this year. We've had good collections, and this doesn't mean that we're losing $950,000 of real estate tax revenue. We collect nearly every penny of this. There's very few times that we don't get the taxes paid. And as you can see in the tax summary report I gave you, in 2021, the Delinquent Tax Claim Bureau gave us $1.2 million in collections from previous years. So most of that money is collected. It's just saying that it wasn't collected in the current tax year and it has to go to tax claim now to be collected.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes, for the overview of both of those and just the summary of tax collections for the city in general. Both of these were reviewed in finance. I know we don't normally send them to finance. I was hoping some of the discussion that might spur would be around just some more intricacies of the tax collections and, in conjunction with, our budgetary situation. So that's why I sent both of them over to finance. Liz, I'll turn this over to you in case there's anything additional that you wanted to share from that discussion.
Hey, Adam, really most of our discussion revolved around that whole, the LST numbers and the wage numbers. And that really relates to just what, as Nick said, what kind of a curve the city is seeing. And we discussed the administration, and much the same as members of council, nobody really has a pulse on that. What our office space purveyors are seeing in the near future. Are they seeing that, that we're going to have Class A office space filled? Are they seeing that they're having tenants who aren't renewing their leases, or tenants who've already given up their leases and there's lots of empty space in town? It was a discussion of things that we don't know, not things that we do know, but kind of a question of what the future holds. And I think actually Treasurer Grimes had sent around an article then yesterday morning, if I recollect correctly, about Wilkes-Barre and a sort of ancillary loss of businesses that Wilkes-Barre is experiencing, because Wilkes-Barre is such a business center, an office center. And when those 11,000 people who were coming into downtown Wilkes-Barre exclusively to work dwindled to 3,000, that meant that they couldn't support restaurants and other businesses that were there to service that community. Williamsport is not as heavily dependent, I don't think, on office business as that. And so that won't likely be our fate, but I still think it behooves us to arrive at a better understanding of the potential advantages to us of the remote work movement versus the disadvantages, and how we can try to capitalize best without losing, for our ancillary businesses in town. That was, as I said, I think, Nick, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, basically the majority of the discussion. You did make one point that I'm not sure if you followed up on here. I apologize. I was distracted for a moment. Nick, you made one point about the fact that we raised taxes and yet our net income last year, I think, was only 1% over the net income from 2020.
Yes, I did not mention that here. So if you look at that total of the collections that we're reporting here, we had a 1% total increase in collection, which in the face of a pandemic, a 1% increase in tax revenue is good.
The one useful thing I did this week on council, so I'm trying to at least recap it.
However, with a tax increase, a real estate tax
Out of your
increase,
house, like
1% certainly does not
what the fuck are you doing
Liz, you're not
there?
muted. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say 1% certainly doesn't cover our increased cost, and especially when we had a real estate tax increase, 1% is not going to keep up with our cost, and it would, the only way to combat that is continual tax increases unless we find ways to raise those others. So there's good and bad news. In the face of a pandemic, a 1% increase in revenue is wonderful and better than a lot of places, but again, that's not going to keep up with our expenses, especially when you factor in the increase in real estate taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Liz, if you have anything else, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Are there any questions or comments from other members of council this evening?
I have one, President Yoder.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Allison, please do.
We talked the page that has the unpaid city real estate in prior years on it. We talked a little bit about that, and the number is really good this year, 6.16. That's historically the lowest for the years that we have here. But generally, we're in that 6 to 8% range. But we did talk about the number of parcels that we've lost. This goes back to 88. So 9,826 we had. 2021 we have 9,022. So we lost 800 some. It's about 8%. And when I looked at a little bit through this, a little closer, 2004 to 2005, we lost, that was the biggest year that we lost parcels. It was 133, I believe. In any case, obviously that's when the hospital began their work. And, just to reiterate, they're still paying city real estate tax on those parcels, the level that they were when they were torn down. there was a steady decline, but if you look at the last, 2016 till now, it's really, the trend looks like it's leveling off, which is a good sign. Hopefully, there's empty parcels around town. I pass them all the time in different places. We have an opportunity there in the future as we generate more economic activity, to make the city attractive for people to move into, in the different ways that we've already covered and talked about and are going to continue to talk about and work on. So, I'm hopeful we've pretty, for the most part, bottomed out, and some of the initiatives that we've been talking about back and forth for a while, and with ARPA and the ARPA money and so forth, that we'll be able to turn that part around and actually begin to see some increases there. And that's the way to bring in more tax revenue.
And if I could make one clarification there, certainly if a nonprofit buys a property that was previously on the tax roll and then it becomes untaxable, that does come out of the number of taxable parcels. But sometimes it's actually a good thing for economic development. When you think we have less parcels, it seems bad. But when the hotels went up, when Kohl's went up, when Liberty Arena went up, when Trade and Transit, in fact, went up, they were all multiple parcels before. And that economic development actually resulted in millions of dollars more in infrastructure, sometimes taxable, sometimes not. Most of the examples I gave are taxable. But it still reduces that number of parcels. And city council sees occasionally when there's a request to combine parcels or sometimes to split parcels for a variety of reasons. But usually combining those parcels is for an economic development purpose.
Would you have, and not tonight, I wouldn't ask you to have that figure, but could you at some point give us a general ballpark figure of what percentage of parcels have been or in that category? Mr. Grimes?
Do you mean of the fewer number of parcels we have today compared to a previous year, how many were combined for development?
Yeah, and not that you have to do an exhaustive thing, but you mentioned some of the more recent ones. If we could have an idea of.
Certainly, I can try. I'll have to check with the assessment office how they track that, but I'm sure we can find some number that's, at least semi-indicative of that trend.
Okay.
Mr. Allison, if you're looking for properties that have been demolished, I did give you that report, and that explains, I'm sorry, this is Joe Girardi, from 2008 until present, what parcels have been demolished. And actually, if you look at the last sheet, it explains to you what they've actually been in their use, the intended use of those particular parcels. So.
Okay, thank you.
And it's not always a demolition either. For example, I think recently, I forget if it was Jeff Carey, somewhere over in the Hepburn Street area, where the street was closed off. There were multiple different parcels there that I think were already vacant, and they were all consolidated into one, right, for sale. So that one wouldn't have been a demolition, but another consolidation, which means, if it was 4 parcels before down to 1, that, reduces the number of parcels by 3, even though it's likely the same amount, or if there's development there, more real estate value.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you, Mr. Allison. Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Liz, did you have another comment? I know you were muted and I think you got cut off.
No. I just I remuted myself for fear of be loud out here. The only comment I was going to make is thinking about conceptually the reasons for which you go through the process of a lot consolidation. I would imagine probably quite a few of them are related to some level of economic development. Now, whether or not that comes to fruition or not, and to what extent it increases the value of the total parcels versus decreases, I think is up for some discussion. I mean, we need to be looked into further, but but it's certainly, I think, conceptually interesting for us. The question, I suppose, of whether the number of parcels drives value in the city when it increases, when it decreases. And I think a lot of that relates to whether or not those parcels are going into nonprofit use or into commercial use. That was all. Thanks, Adam.
All right, thanks, Liz. Are there any other comments from members of council this evening? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 4-0. Thank you all. Item 9, Mrs. Frank in short form, please.
Resolution real estate tax collection exoneration.
Is there a motion, a second to open discussion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we're, Mr. Grimes, anything to add? We kind of hit this one earlier, so.
No, just that the first resolution was to turn those taxes over to county tax claim, and then this exonerates the treasurer from being responsible to collect those taxes, since that is now tasked to county tax claim. And you can't vote no just to get 2 people to collect it. That doesn't work either.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Ms. Mealy from Finance, is there anything to add from the previous discussion?
Well, we did threaten to, at some point or another, refuse to exonerate Nick from tax collection after passing it over to the county. But in this particular instance, we forwarded both with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Are there any questions or comments from other members of council this evening? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Perfect. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you all. And thank you, Mr. Grimes. You have yourself a good evening. Moving on, item 10, Mrs. Frank in short form, please.
Resolution authorizing the Second Amendment to the Master Services Agreement between the City of Williamsport and Wood Environment and Infrastructural Solutions Incorporated.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Sander, good evening, sir.
Yes, yes, hi, good evening, everybody. What you have before you is a master service agreement between the City of Williamsport and Wood Engineering. We previously had master service agreements in 2017, 2018, and they have since expired. This is just restarts the MSA. It's essentially 10 pages of contractual paperwork that Wood Engineering's legal and contract folks require in order to for us to do business. Excuse me, do business with Wood. This was reviewed by Solicitor Austin White ahead of time, and it was reviewed in Public Works on Tuesday, given a positive recommendation. This sets us up for at least three future levy, or excuse me, 2 levy design contracts and 1 Graphius Run related contract for the City of Williamsport. Let me know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sander. This was reviewed in Public Works. Mrs. Katz?
Yes, it was. We had a discussion about this contract. We have been dealing with Wood for a good many years. One of the statements that was made, and I think this came from Councilman and Randy Allison, that there are only a couple of companies in the country that do this kind of work to begin with. The only thing that I wanted to see in the future here, I would really like to know how much money we have already spent in the last 9 to 10 years on all of our contracts with our engineers and any of the grants that came through. I think we've spent quite a bit of money, and hopefully we are going to be breaking ground shortly with some works being done. I see the mayor met with some of the people in Baltimore, and we were told that there wasn't going to be some money, and obviously I think you've come up with talking to people that there might be some money available, maybe. And in order to get our levy accredited, we do have to move forward on this. And hopefully that our lobbyists are going to be working to get more money. The county has put a lot of time and energy and money into our levy, and they're the ones who have taken a major part of the lead, I would say, in this, along with Senator Yaw and
going after what we need because everybody realizes how important to get our levy accredited. I don't have anything else to add for this contract. It is important that we do sign the contract. Like I said, there was only a couple of companies that do this kind of work, and it's much needed that we have to sign this contract.
Thank you, Mrs. Katz. Are there any questions or comments from other members of council this evening on this motion? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Mr. Sander. Moving on, item 11, Mrs. Frank in short form, please.
Resolution authorizing an agreement between the city of Williamsport and Choice Carpet Cleaners.
Is there a motion and a second on the, to open discussion?
So moved.
second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Livermore, good evening, sir.
So what you have before you today is a resolution authorizing an agreement between the city of Williamsport and Choice Carpet Cleaning to enter into a contract agreement with Choice Contract for Carpet Cleaning, a janitorial service to service City Hall facilities, Trade and Transit 1, Trade and Transit 2, and Nichols Place, which is our police department. This started in July 1, 2021, and will go through February 28, 2022. Choice will provide a cleaning service Monday through Friday at these facilities at a day rate of $90. This was reviewed through in finance and passed with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Livermore. Ms. Mealy, this was reviewed in finance.
This was indeed reviewed in finance. And I'm assuming everyone can hear me, right? Okay, the mic feels far away. But I'm excited to have my own mic. So whoever took care of that,
I know.
thank you.
I was told we got to speak into this.
Yeah, that's what I was concerned about.
Yes.
I can't hear my own voice,
Yes.
which made me wonder if you guys can hear my voice. Anyway, this did come before the finance committee, was passed with a positive recommendation. Both of these items were, I inquired, and I don't think we had a definitive answer at the time as to how these rates compared to previous rates when we were in City Hall. Mr. Winder thought that they were lower, but it was a little unclear in part because the contract does include some of City Hall as well. So we're still, I think, sort of trying to figure out, and we currently have an RFP out for that will for a contract that will start the 1st of March for services that are exclusively for the areas currently occupied by city government. But I think the only major discussion we had about this, because clearly janitorial services are important to the regular and sanitary functioning of the city, was we made a comment. I made a comment that generally speaking, we prefer to see contracts prior to the commencement of the contracts, not 6 months in. And secondarily, that when city government, obviously, situationally speaking, is kind of in a state of flux right now, and we don't know exactly where departments are going to settle, where the city as a whole will settle. But when that does happen, if we find ourselves in multiple different structures as we currently do, it would strike me as a wise idea for us to segregate out those structures individually and contractually speaking, in the same way that, as we're seeing on tonight's agenda, Public Works is segregated out from the rest of the city departments. And that historically is because Public Works has always occupied a separate structure from the city. In this case, now the city occupies, the city departments encompassed in this item occupy 3 separate structures. So it would make sense at some point to track our cleaning differently. And also, I would anticipate that some of our departments have greater cleaning needs than others, and we would be better able to deal with that, I think, under separate contracts. That was everything from the finance committee, unless Randy, you have any recollections of items of note that I've forgotten?
Not on this issue.
Uh-oh, that means I
It was
forgot
pretty
something else.
cut and
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. What was the reasoning that we're getting this later, or I guess in the middle of the period? Was there an answer or a reason for that discussed in finance?
We did well. I think we actually had a bit more discussion about this when the original contract with Choice with RVT came to us in December, maybe November. That was also late, and I believe the reasoning behind it, although Mr. Livermore, you'll pardon me if I'm misstating, is that with all of the things in flux, we sort of continued existing contracts without having actually officially executed them, because Choice was cleaning City Hall. And so then they simply moved to cleaning all the various premises occupied by the city. And anyway, this sort of, I think, nobody knew exactly what we were requesting of them. And also we didn't get around to executing the contract. Adam was my general impression, but I'll defer to Mr. Livermore, or Mr. Winder, if there's a better reason than that. There you go. I am eloquent indeed tonight. I think you might have heard that there when I wasn't muted for a second. That's everything then, Adam.
Thank you. I guess a follow-up question for me, and then I'll open it up to other members of council. I mean, are there other potential contracts floating out there that might have fallen under this category that we need to be aware of, that we need to get cleaned up? I mean, it's a minimal item, I think, in the grand scheme of things, but you know, I think just trying to minimize little things like that falling through the cracks is a good practice. And if there's others out there, you know, this is how expenses can creep and what have you. So I don't know if there is or isn't. I guess maybe that would be good to understand. Yeah, and just make sure we do a circle back and making sure that we tidy any of those up. I guess just a general comment. I'll open up
We
for
did
other-
discuss, Adam, if I can put this out there, that we will, we are fully anticipating seeing the contract, the next contract with the cleaning company or companies that come out on top in the RFP prior to the beginning of prior to the March 1st commencement date. So at least we'll be on the level with this one. But I would agree with Mr. Yoder that if there are other items that we simply were kind of scrambling and didn't quite get to, it would be good to have those surface sooner rather than later. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you all. Are there other comments from other members of council on the item on discussion? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Mr. Livermore. Item 12, Mrs. Frank, in short form, please.
Resolution authorizing an amendment between Public Works Department and Choice Carpet Cleaners.
Is there a motion and a second to open discussion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Mr. Livermore, you're up again.
Yeah, so what you have before you is a resolution authorizing an agreement between the Public Works Department and Choice Carpet Cleaning. Again, similar to same as the city. They will provide a cleaning service for the Public Works Department for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at a $30 day rate. And it was reviewed in finance and passed with positive recommendation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Livermore. This was reading finance, as he had mentioned. Liz?
It was and forwarded with positive recommendation, but I don't recollect any specific discussion related to this. We didn't ask what they were cleaning up at Public Works or anything. I think we're all clear. Thanks, Adam.
Perfect. Are there any other questions or comments from other members of council on the motion?
The only,
I'm sorry, Mr. Allison.
yeah, the only difference between the two is one's Monday through Friday and one's Monday,
Wednesday,
this one's
Friday.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
And significantly less money to my recollection, right? This is $30. This is $30 a day
Yes,
versus 90 a
$30
day
a day,
for the
Monday,
other.
Wednesday,
Yeah.
Friday. Yep.
Yeah, so there are some fiscal differences, but presumably related to the specific needs of the
Yeah,
individual.
smaller
departments being
facility.
serviced. Right.
Gotcha.
Muddy boots and not much else to worry about over there, right?
Gotcha. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Livermore. Thank you, Ms. Mealy from Finance, and thank you, Mrs. Frank. Moving on, item 13, Mrs. Frank in short form.
A resolution authorizing the City of Williamsport Public Works Department to amend a street line painting agreement with Mid-Atlantic Marking Corporation.
Is there a motion and a second to open discussion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Livermore, one more time.
What you have in front of you is a resolution authorizing the city of Williamsport and the Public Works Department to amend the street line painting agreement with Mid-Atlantic Incorporated. The original budget was for $13,437.03. We went over $6,228.41. The reason being is the street resurfacing projects that took place in 2021, we had to place 50,229 lineal foot, additional lineal foot on some of these projects. And the extras, the 6,228.41, we're going to pull it out of the liquid fuel account. This was reviewed in Public Works and it passed with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Livermore. Bonnie, Public Works.
Yes, this did come to Public Works, and I think Mr. Livermore explained it thoroughly. I don't think there's anything else to add.
Thank you, Mrs. Katz. Are there any other questions from other members of council this evening on this motion?
Just a quick one from me, Adam, if you don't mind.
By
I'm
all
assuming,
means.
thanks. This is coming from liquid fuel surplus, like prior year surplus, or from current year liquid fuels? Okay, prior year surplus. Got it. Just double checking. And it's not an expense we're anticipating having moving forward.
So, yeah, so all the lines that we do every year, pretty much they come in and have to refresh and everything in the city. So with the, like I said, with the resurfacing projects that took place, that added all that additional lineal foot.
Got it.
So ended up being 6,000 over.
Okay. I think I'm primarily asking because I have been pitching to the administration to consider adding bike lanes in some areas, and I'm just curious. I guess this gives us a bit of an idea of what the likely cost would be for something like that. I'm
Mhm.
guessing we're
Well,
looking
and
somewhere-
the cost from last year, it was up 21 cents
Okay.
per lineal foot, so
lineal
which
foot.
that helped inflate that increase. So
Yeah, and I'm guessing the cost is not likely to go down.
No.
No, the labor costs being what they are and only going up, and the cost of materials. Okay, got it.
yeah,
There were a handful of prices that came back down after a bit of a pandemic inflation, but not many. All right, thanks. That's everything.
Are there any other questions for members of council? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Livermore. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Janice. Continuing on, item 14, Mrs. Frank, short form.
Resolution authorizing River Valley Transit to adopt an auditing services agreement / engagement.
Is there a motion and a second to open discussion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Winder, good evening, sir.
Good evening. This resolution is to authorize RKL Auditing to perform River Valley Transit's fiscal year 2021 audit in the amount of $35,000. RKL did perform the audit last year, or 2019's audit, I apologize. 2019, 2020. So it only made the most sense to bring forward RKL to do the 2020, 2021 audit. This was reviewed before the new Transit Oversight Committee and passed with a positive recommendation. It is in the amount of $35,000. And there was a new resolution sent out earlier today to reflect that $35,000 amount.
Thank you, Mr. Winder. Yeah, this was reviewed in Transit Oversight and forwarded with a positive recommendation. To Mr. Winder's point, so in the discussion, so 2019, 2020's audit was $35,000. The original proposed resolution reflected $37,000. There was a couple extra $1,000 in there in case they ran into anything similar to what they did with the previous year's audit. If everybody recalls, there was a change order because of some items that they ran into that were not accounted for. And the discussion was putting it back to the actual budgeted price, and mainly as a way, it's not a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's more of an accountability mechanism, given everything going on at River Valley Transit. If there would be something that would come up, that would probably be something that we as council would want to know about. So that would just simply trigger this coming back again in the change order. So we have the opportunity to ask questions, get to the bottom of it, that kind of thing. Some of the other discussion surrounding this there was some discussion about the time frame of this. The previous audit we passed right at the end of the fiscal year. This we are doing 8 months into the next fiscal year. Mr. Winder, forgive me. There was a reason for that, and I'm struggling to recall what that was. Would you be so kind as to relay that to the broader group of council?
The reason being was the extensive amount of work that was performed during the 2019-2020 audit. It did cause for a lengthy time period till we actually got a final audit that was sent out to everyone, I believe about 2 weeks ago. We could not start the next audit until the 1920 audit was finalized and presented to council.
Thank you, Mr. Winder. I appreciate you refreshing my memory. So aside from that, this was a lot of the discussion. And again, it was forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. I will open the floor for other questions from other members of council.
I don't have a question. To your point, Mr. Yoder, about getting communication from them, and this the $2,000 contingency would be a mechanism to get that. I noticed they have a communication statement in their opening letter where they said effective two-way communication between the firm and the board of directors is important to understanding matters related to the audit and developing constructive working relationship. And the second paragraph down from that, we will timely communicate to you any fraud involving senior management or other known or likely fraud, non-compliance, et cetera, et cetera. It talks a lot about that. There's a lot of language in there. So I feel, with those, I think it's a good idea what you proposed with the committee proposed with the contingency. And I think they're going to lean that way in any case, according to what they said. So I feel confident in this firm. I think they did a really good job first time around because they jumped into something that it was a bit of a knotted ball of things. So I'm just so that the public has confidence in the process that's underway. I think this confirms that we're gonna, and in this firm, this auditing firm is going to do their due diligence, and we are too. So that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Allison. I appreciate those comments and couldn't agree more. Your comments about some of the language that was in the document from the auditors, it triggered, we didn't really discuss this in oversight, but I did compare on my own in prep for this document and the one from the previous audit that we approved. And there's very similar language in each of those. A lot of it is boilerplate. So I think just for the public's sake, we all know what is going on and has been out there about River Valley Transit. I don't necessarily think any of the language included in this is directly reflective of the ongoing investigation of River Valley Transit. It may be to a degree, but a number of these items, and specifically some that you referenced, Mr. Allison, were also included in the one prior, before a lot of the information about the previous audit came out. So, but I would agree. I think this is a good firm, and I think we're wise to provide some continuity here, at least in the short term. So are there any other comments or questions for members of council?
No.
Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. We'll move on to item 15. Mrs. Frank in short form, please.
Resolution authorizing the city of Williamsport to adopt River Valley Transit 2021 System Performance Review Act 44 and Action Plan.
Is there a motion and a second to open discussion?
So move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Winder, back to you, sir.
This resolution is to authorize the city of Williamsport to adopt River Valley Transit's 2021 System Performance Review and Act 44 and the action plan for the Act 44 review. In September, I believe, is when City Council received a copy of the Act 44 performance review. At that time, it was on River Valley Transit to basically give a plan moving forward, how to address the issues that were found in the Act 44 review. That was then sent into PennDOT for the review. They agree with the terms that we set forth. So now this requires action of the mayor to sign the overall plan so we could submit it back to PennDOT with approval. This was reviewed in the Transit Oversight Committee, and I do have Todd Wright and myself here to answer any questions you may have pertaining to this.
Thank you, Mr. Winder. Yes, this was reviewed in Transit Oversight, and it was forwarded to the full body with a positive recommendation. Mr. Winder summed up pretty good. One of the items of discussion related to this was the process and the time frame between September and now. And as he described, there is a process of formal collaboration required between the city of Williamsport, River Valley Transit, and PennDOT that he outlined, which explains why this is coming to us now versus September, October timeframe, whenever it was published and completed. A couple of the other things that were items of discussion were really surrounded a couple of the recommendations that you'll see in the beginning part of the resolution in the document, because there's responses that we put together and put in there and for submission to PennDOT. One of them was surrounding strategic planning. That's been something that has been ongoing, and Mr. Winder was gracious to provide a little bit of what has happened previously, but also what's going on moving forward, and kind of clarifying the language surrounding the consultant that is referenced in there. And then there was a lot of discussion as well about intergovernmental support, as you notice, and I think we've talked about this through budget and even before then. There's a recommendation about transitioning away from using RVT for intergovernmental support, and there was some discussion about really just quantifying what has been severed already and what still does need to be severed. And the team at River Valley Transit is working through and putting that together so that we, number one, make sure that we catch everything and we don't lose a service, or a service doesn't fall through the cracks. But number two, just from a compliance perspective, making sure that we actually do it. And then there was some also discussion about some of the changes in job responsibilities, because that was part of some of the recommendations from cost management and financial management and compliance. And they are working on putting together a couple of different org charts and documents that kind of outline what they had versus what they have now, to help quantify what was versus what is now, and so that we can, I think, better understand what that recommendation looks like and why it makes sense. So That was a lot of the discussion. Again, this was forwarded with a positive recommendation, and I'll yield the floor to other members of council for other questions or comments. And Adam, feel free to chime in if I missed anything.
You covered it pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from other members of council this evening?
No, Adam.
All right, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mrs. Frank. Thank you, Mr. Winder as well. Appreciate your time this evening. Item 16, Mrs. Frank, short form, please.
Mr. Jardy, certificate of appropriateness.
Mr. Girardi, good evening, sir.
Good evening, President Yoder and members of council. What you have before you is a certificate of appropriateness request for the property located at 454 Pine Street. Attached for your review is the proposed certificate of appropriateness request. The owner requests the following items. If we can take, I'll discuss all three of them. You can approve them all as one or make changes as you go along. The first one, he'd like to erect a canopy at the front entrance. I have attached a photo of the canopy. If everybody remembers, there used to be a canopy there that was a brown one that was the Pascal Temps. That used to be their entrance. The owner switched out the canopies, not really realizing they needed a permit for that. So this has been erected. It's black with a little red on it, and it's called the Newsroom Grill and Spirits. Several years ago, this property was the exterior colors of the windows. He got approved by city council to be black, so it does blend in with the black windows. If you have any questions at this time of that, I'll be more than happy to answer those. If not, I'll proceed to the next.
Are there any questions for members of council?
No,
You
Adam.
can proceed, Mr. Girardi.
Okay, I also attached the site plan with it. It shows you the location of these three items. The second one, he wants to erect a 16 by 18 pergola in the front of the structure with a fenced-in enclosure. I have attached a photo of what he'd like to do. This is a pergola and a fenced-in area in another location, the Central Business District, that was approved probably 2.5 years ago. So that's what he'd like to erect in the front of the structure. And if you've been there, it's that little circle. There's a circle that goes around the front of the old city hall. This would be on the back side of that, so it wouldn't be in the front. It would be between that and the building. More than happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Are
I
there,
do, Adam.
Mrs. Katz?
I do. This is really a huge pergola to put in front of the structure. Looking where it's going to be, is this going to detract from the signage and also the aesthetics of the building?
I would say this much, the signage as far as the canopy and so forth, no, it would not interfere. If you look where the canopy sign is and where this pergola is going to be placed, okay, it's offset from the building. 16 by 18, it's a little bit bigger than a person's detached shed, and it's an open structure, it's not enclosed. And it does weather. If you think about it, we do have one that was previously approved by city council 4 years ago or 5 years ago, that's across from our building at City Hall, that there is a open pergola where it says, I forget, I think some type of sign up above it, but it's an open pergola that's attached to the Sun Gazette building next to the Community Arts building. Very similar. It's an open pergola. And it does weather with years because of the rain and so forth, So, and I'm pretty sure we have a person here from the newsroom. I may be correct, because they said they were going to be on tonight. I didn't notice through the captions or if he called in.
I don't know if we do have anybody. Is there anybody here
Okay.
from the newsroom? I don't think so.
Not here in the,
No, I'm not seeing it either. That's okay.
But that's what you have. So again, that's the best I can answer. If I can answer any other questions, more than happy to try.
When are they going to start building the structure? Because it's not up there yet.
Correct. It would be based on approval through you and a permit through the city of Williamsport.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Girardi, is that everything that you had as well?
No, there's
Really?
one other item on that particular
Okay.
project.
Are
Okay.
there other questions from council members on this project before
Well-
Mr. Girardi continues?
Yeah, I actually would have one, Adam.
Certainly.
This is Old City Hall, correct?
That's correct.
I know, I'm staring at the structure and I'm having a hard time putting together the diagram that we've got and the location of the things with what I remember being there.
What you have, Miss Mealy, is you have a picture of exactly what he wants to do with the metal fence around it, but it's in another location in the city of Williamsport that we previously approved. Okay, it's not showing it in front of the old city hall.
Yeah, but I guess the photo of the newsroom, presumably, the newsroom thing is in situ, right? It's on the building?
Yes, that is on the building.
And that's
What he
on the-
did was he switched out canopies, not knowing that he needed a permit for that.
Yeah.
Okay, and again,
Yeah,
that's
it's on
something
the-
that, again, he'll pay double the fine on the sign, and if you do not like the canopy, you have that option to change it if you wish.
Right. Yeah, I guess all that I'm wondering then about the pergola is there really is that much space between the drive in front of the building and the building itself?
Yes. Yeah, I walked out there and looked at it. Sure, it is. If you look at the site plan that you see,
Yeah, I'm looking
Okay.
at the site plan. I just don't remember there being that much space between the driveway
I
and the
know.
building.
Yes.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
What is the purpose? Did he say why he wants to have a pergola there?
well, he is opening, he
Oh.
did apply for a permit to renovate the lower level, which is ADA handicap accessible, into a restaurant, bar, because he does have a license for the above rental properties that he has, almost like a hotel motel. So he's always wanted to do a restaurant bar, and he decided to finally do it. So that's what we have. We have a bar down below that has an occupancy load of, I believe, 56 individuals that can have a restaurant down below and eat. He also wants to do outdoor seating, which is the front pergola, and then the next one, which would be the rear dining area.
Tiki bar.
Hey, tiki bar sounds good.
I know, it does.
And also, if you,
The tiki bar.
well, that's our next one. That's our next.
Yeah, I know. No, I mean, in the end, the pergola is really only a semi-fixed structure anyway, correct? It's not something that's gonna be, right, that has to be there indefinitely, but it's not a modification to the historic structure or anything. I'm just trying to wrap my head, I think this is Katz and I are just trying to wrap.
Yeah,
our
I
head around-
understand that. It's hard to put the two together. You have a building that was built back in 18 something, and you're putting something that's there that's more modern than, 1970, 1988, 90. I understand this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I would encourage perhaps some consideration of the context of the structure. It's a little hard for me to make out the detail on the pergola. It looks like there's some level of detail to it, but perhaps I'm misreading the image. But yeah, that's not so much my concern. It's just that it seems like it might look a little cluttered in front of the structure.
Right.
But but that's probably due to us not having a rendering of it in front of the structure.
Right. And
Anyway,
again, it's not going to be erected today or tomorrow. If you wished for him to do a rendering of this in front of the building, so you have a better perspective, you can do that. You don't have to approve all three. You can approve one of the three or two of the three. That's up to city council. Because it is one of those kind of things that I understand. You're putting this in front of an older building. You want to make sure it fits in properly.
Right, make sure it's an asset, I suppose. And you said the pergola and the fence are going to be
Yes.
featured? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I don't see any major issue with it. It can come back out at some point, so yeah. Yeah, I think we can certainly trust the judgment of the property owner here on the
I know he's trying to build his
visual appeal.
restaurant and stuff.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
don't want outdoor seating.
Right, well, no,
people.
the outdoor seating thing makes perfect sense to me. It's
Yeah,
just that I'm just having a hard time picturing
I
it
know.
in the foreground there, but that's my fault for not having looked at this a little.
I did not,
like,
I could not.
yeah, well, with the snow and everything, it's a bit hard to visualize too. Anyway, that's water under the bridge. Anybody else have any comments? Bonnie and I have belabored this long enough.
You covered it. Quite
Mr.
well.
Girardi, continue on then.
Okay, the very last thing he wishes to do in the rear of the building, he wishes to do two items. I have attached a photo of the fencing that he'd like to place out back of the building. That is actually the look of the fence, but it's not the color. The color will be black. This fence is another thing that was approved several years back for the Genetti. They have that black fence and this type of fencing around their seating area. Okay. And also he would like to place a Piggy Hut, which I have attached a picture of it. It is basically a Amish built shed. And it's going to be that material. And it has a, as you saw, if you notice what I did was I crossed off the area where there's going to be a fold out kind of tabletop that drops down that people can sit in that fenced in area and have some cocktails and beverages or, dinner and so forth. Again, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. The shingles will match the shingle color of the city, old city hall.
Are there any questions from anybody on this piece of this?
I think we like this one. This will look
Good.
really cool in the back.
Well, I missed, Mr. Girardi, I'm sorry. Where is the shed going to be placed? In the back?
If you look at my site plan, it's in the rear of the building. And it is, it sits in the alcove. You won't be able to see it from North Street or Pine Street. It'll be facing Court Street in the rear of the property. Okay, it's that little fence that says fenced area. It's going to be in there.
Oh, it's going to be in the fenced area.
Yes, up against the back of the building.
Okay.
I thought what you thought, Randy, that big square was the, there's.
No, it's inside that square. It's inside that square. And
Inside
again, I
the-
don't know what scale this drawing is, but it's probably like 1 inch equals 100 feet or 1 inch equals 50 feet. So, the shed is very minute in that area.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for members of council on any of these three?
No,
Great. Yeah, I would just thank this individual for making this investment. I'm very much looking forward to getting there and trying this out. I know we had some questions surrounding a number of things on this, but I think the most important thing is, that building is continuing to progress. And even though this might be a singular investment, it's an investment nonetheless. And, when we're talking about a nearly $2 million deficit, when we have revenue growth that trails our expenditure growth, even though this is, a small investment, it's an investment nonetheless. We need more of this to kind of dig ourselves out of our deficit hole. And so I would just thank them very much for working with us tonight and investing in the city. We're very much appreciative of it.
If I can add one thing, Mr. Oder, to that.
Yes.
If you get the opportunity, like you said, he has a lot of history inside the building of different things that occurred over the time frame. It's very nice looking. And just in case everybody wants to know, the tower he has been working on for the last probably 8 months. Water got in behind a lot of the concrete and the brickwork and pushed those large concrete trim work and so forth out. So he had those taken down. He's replacing that in kind, so it'll look exactly the same as it was before. But just in case anybody's wondering, takes a little time to get that stuff made up. So.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Girardi. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
yes,
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Girardi. Thank you, everyone. Item 17, except for filing, we've got the public safety minutes from October 19th, 2021. Blighted residential dwellings for January 2008 through December 2021. New business and dwellings, January 2008, December 2021. Monthly report, Bureau of Codes for December of 2021, and the Bureau of Codes demolitions, January 08 through December 21. Is there a motion and a second to accept for filing?
So move.
second,
Is there any questions or comments from members of council on the motion? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you all. Item 18, announcements. The next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be held on Thursday, February 3rd, 2022 at 7 p.m. right here at Trade and Transit 2. Upcoming meetings, tomorrow's ERC meeting, Friday at 1 p.m. will be canceled, actually. Mr. Biter is out of the area and travel and will not be able to have that one. Monday, January 31st, 7 p.m. is our next ARPA work session. We'll very much look forward to that. Tuesday, February 1st, 11:30 a.m. is public safety, 1 p.m. finance, 2:30 p.m. public works, and 4 p.m. transit oversight committee. And Thursday, February 3rd at 7 p.m. is our next city council meeting. Are there any comments from members of council this evening? I would just like to give a shout out to Public Works. Our city clerk is in a new location on the first floor of Trade and Transit 2. I hope she's much more accessible and in a better location for our constituents. And I would just thank the Public Works Department. They made that really seamless. It was fairly easy and very much appreciated. So we thank you for all your work today. And I thank you also for your work Monday, Tuesday with our recent weather event that we had. I had a lot of people in my neighborhood, at least, that were very happy with the timeliness and level that we were able to get the streets plowed. So thank you very much for that. Are there any other comments from members of council?
No.
Hearing and seeing none, are there any comments from the administration?
No.
Hearing and seeing none, are there any comments from the public?
No. Oh, yes, there is.
If you would, once you reach the podium, state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Frank Steckel. I live at 619 First Ave. I'm a committee person for the Democratic Party. I had a couple little things. I went to the codes office today. I noticed some cracks in the concrete when you come up the steps. I think the building's only 10 years old and it shouldn't be cracked. And if it continues the way it is, it's going to be a major expense, which everybody's interested in. The biggest crack, the smallest crack that had been dealt with some time ago would be, not even the biggest, it wouldn't be a big crack now, and the little ones probably wouldn't be there. So I know I was going to tell Mr. Winder about it, but I didn't have a chance. So I thought I'd bring it to council. They could save tens of thousands of dollars if they can put a preservative of some sort in there and fix these cracked steps before they get out of hand. They might not even last the winter, It's a small thing, but I think it's an interesting thing that the main entrance to a main building should be neglected by everyone that goes in there like that. Well, I'm not pointing a finger at anybody in particular. I'm just saying it's sort of like when the roof was blowing off the building on the old building and I came in and reported to Mr. Allison and others, and there was no comment. I think at one point I said that for sure if somebody was hurt or killed, that there'd be criminal prosecution. That and you're talking about money and expenses. I see now this is a statewide issue. Some senators, some politicians at the state level are trying to make names for themselves, and they're using public funds, I guess, to challenge the last election again, after so many states have done it. When I see that in Arizona and out west and some of those, and forgive me for the term, but most people say hick states, I think, well, that's because they're hick states. When I see it in Pennsylvania, it makes me beyond irritable. And I think that the last time I saw public funds wasted for private advancement, if I'm not mistaken, was a good friend of mine I went to school with named Brett Feast, DA for Lycoming County, and then he became state rep for a couple of terms, and then he was head of the Republican caucus. And in the end, he did 4 years in state prison for what I think appears to be the same very exact thing. public monies that we need, as Mr. Yoder said, on an infinitum for our own advancement is used for some rinky-dink, stupid, backwards challenge that's been disassociated every court in this country. Now, I want to know why you people aren't approaching Wheeland and Yaw to ask if they're behind this so the public knows, because they represent this city, if I'm not mistaken. So there's something for you to think about. And Republican and Democrat alike. And I'd like to know if anybody here agrees with me or if they think it's a good idea. I know you usually don't like to comment on anything. God forbid somebody might hear you say something of some value. By the way, Mr. Yoder, congratulations on, I believe you're the new president. God help us. It's like the president of the United States. The new one has a lot to deal with after the last one's.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your well wishes, and you've reached your time for this evening. So thank you very much for your comments. We'll make sure that we look into the steps. Are there any other comments from members of the public?
Don't see anybody, Adam.
Are there any comments from the news media?
Don't see the news media here either.
All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. You all have a good evening.